our beliefs have more to do with our success than our behaviors. I'm gonna share with you the 5 leadership beliefs, and I just wanna have a conversation with any leashes that you have around the beliefs. So again, I'm gonna go through each one, and as I quickly go through each one, explain them, give examples, we'll talk it through, make sure you guys get it. So whatever we teach you from a behavioral standpoint doesn't matter if we can't get in alignment with these beliefs. So these beliefs are everything. This is the philosophy of leadership sales coaching. And so I wanna make sure I teach these to you. And again, if there's any areas that we're out of rapport, not on the same page with it, then I want us to talk to them through, because this is the container that all behaviors will be falling into after this. So the first belief is a salesperson is an athlete and should be coached like an athlete, not managed like an employee. So let's just think about this, right? So we believe that these salespeople, they're there for performance, right? They're there because they didn't want a 9-to-5 job. A 9-to-5 job means they can make, $50,000 a year working 9 to 5 and having, governmental holidays off and bank holidays off. And that's not what these people want. These salespeople say, you know what? I want to bet on myself. I want to bet on myself, and I want to take on the added risk of working nights, weekends, major holidays. I want to take on the risk of having a draw or no commission or no salary at all. I want to take on the risk of that. So that I can bet on myself, so that I can make more than a 9-to-5 job. I know I'm gonna miss nights and weekends, major holidays. I know I'm gonna miss all that stuff, but I'm betting on myself, and therefore, that's what I'm here for. That's what salespeople are. That's why they sign up for the gig. That's what they come to the table with. In order to our part, we have to see them as an athlete. We have to see them as a soldier. We have to see them as the warrior that they are, and we have to go about it as, okay, well, if they're an athlete, if they're a soldier, then how would I be training them? How would I be coaching them? How would I be working with them? If I'm getting them ready for a big game or a big battle, what am I gonna do to teach them to be more effective? It's thinking at it completely differently and seeing them from an identity perspective of that, and knowing that they are doing the best they can with the resources they have, and those resources are what they think about, say, and do. But positive change comes from adding more resources. So if they really are an athlete, and they are going to be rewarded based upon their ability to perform in this situation, then how can I up-level what they think about, say, and do? And how can I also make sure they don't choke in the game? So what does that mean? Well, again, we're going along this kind of theme of being an athlete. Well, in performance, a coach is always focused on, are you panicking or are you coaching? So if I'm a football coach, or I'm a soccer coach, or whatever I am, or a wrestling coach, or a kickboxing coach, if I'm doing that, then first I want to figure out, hey, do you know how to win in this scenario? And if you don't, that means you're panicking. It means I don't know how to win. I don't know how to do this. That's panicking. So I'm going to give them the knowledge. I'm going to give them, what to say, do, and think about in order to move forward. And I'm going to make sure that they know how to say, do, and think that stuff in order to do it. That's the knowledge. If in the game, if they've been taught how to catch the football, let's say they're a wide receiver or whatever the position is, they've been taught how to catch football, and all of a sudden the play is executed and they fumble or they don't catch the football, that means they've choked. They didn't panic. So they know what to do, they just didn't do it. And so then as a leader, as a coach, because they're an athlete, because they're a soldier, I have to figure out, why do they choke? Was it a motivation thing? They just didn't bought into it. They kind of can demonstrate they can do it when I'm around, but they really don't want to do it without me being around. They really don't believe in it. Is it because they had a leash? They're afraid. They have a limiting belief, some reluctance that told them, what's the point? For example, if they, again, going back, if there's a cultural buyer and they're like, what's the point of even trying this because it's not gonna work? Or no one can sell an absentee buyer when a husband's not present, or vice versa. So that's the first one. The second one, a coach's job is to call the plays and take responsibility for the results. So the relationship that you wanna have with your sales people is that your job is to call the play. Your job is to call, hey, here's what I want you to say in order to sell through this situation. The player's responsibility is to run the play. If the play's not correct, then we as a leader have to take responsibility that, hey, I called the wrong play. But their responsibility is they have to run the play that we call. So if they don't run the play that we call, then it's on them. But if they run the play that we call, but it's not working, it's on us. And that's an important relationship that you want to make sure that you have with your seller, that I'm not asking for you to call the play and run the play. I'm asking for you to just run the play that I call. But if you don't succeed and you run my play, then I can cover you, then I can get your back. If a person's not making their number, and your owner comes to you and says, why is so-and-so not converting? The only acceptable answer needs to be, well, there must be something with the plays that we are calling based upon the circumstance that's out there. Based on what the customers they've been given, the plays are not correct. Well, what do you mean they're not correct? Well, because they're running these plays, but they're not converting. And so we need to figure out how to change the strategy in order to get different results. That's the answer we want to live by, that we got to figure out how to change the strategy. But in order to do that, you have to feel confident that they are actually running the plays that you're calling, that they're executing properly. So for example, in our world, one of the common things that keeps salespeople from converting is not that they haven't been taught the 12 steps. It's not that they don't know to categorize the buyer. It's that they're not running the play when they have a category 1 buyer, which is a buyer who hasn't decided to make a change. They haven't decided to remodel their bathroom, or they haven't decided to buy a house and put their current house on the market. They haven't made that change. They haven't decided to change their financing. So they haven't changed. They haven't decided to change that stuff. And so instead, the salesperson hasn't focused on that, but instead focuses on category 3 behaviors, which is, if you buy today, you're gonna get blank, which is a category 3 message. It's an incentive-based message, or it's a circumstantial scarcity tactic. So that would be an example of, if they've been taught how to sell appropriately to the 3 categories and it's not working, then it's on us. It's on us as the training team, it's on us as the leadership team that we're calling the wrong place. But if we're calling the play and they're not executing the play, then it's on them. Now, it's possible that once they execute it, it still doesn't work. Okay, well then it's back on us. But we don't know if the play is incorrect until obviously they can run the play, and then we have enough data to see that it's not working, or it's not working the way that we intend it to work. So again, that's number 2, right? A coach's job is to call the play and take responsibility for the results. The last thing I'll say on this is a much more prescriptive style of leadership than a lot of people have signed up for, or maybe their personal philosophy is. So a lot of people, their philosophy of leadership is, I hire great people and I leave them alone. That's a lot of the philosophy out there with coaching. That's not the philosophy that we teach. We believe in hiring coachable, goal-oriented, unleashed of excuses, motivated to endure, procedural-minded salespeople. And then we believe in coaching them and leading them to become the best version of them. The message I always deliver is Tom Brady, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps, you name it. If they ever had a leader that said, hey, you're talented, but we're not gonna coach you, we would not know who these people are. The reason why those goats are goats is because they had the talent to be a goat, they had the belief system, the mindset to be a goat, but they also had the coaching along the way that made all the difference to bring out the best in them and allow them to become who they really were. We would not know who they were if it wasn't for coaching. And I know that to be true, and please research that. But there's not a single person that I mentioned that doesn't have coaching. Not a single one. There's not a single one that doesn't have a backstory of signing up for the greatest coaches in their life, to hold them accountable, to bring out the best in them, to make them consistent, to make sure they didn't choke. All of them have great coaches. The third leadership belief is this, and that's, a person is not their thoughts, emotions, or behaviors. So this is kind of a weird one. So what this means is that a person is not a lazy person. A person is just choosing lazy actions, or a person is just choosing a lazy mindset. So a person is not their thoughts, emotions, or behaviors. So it's this person, this is not a oppositional person, or this is not a worried person. This is not a difficult person. No, it's just the person currently right now and has a pattern of choosing oppositional behaviors. This person has choosing oppositional thoughts. This person has a pattern of complaining over and over again. Why do I share that with you? Because the only way to change someone, the only way to get a person to be unleashed, the only way to get a person to become something bigger than themselves is to realize that their current personality is affecting their current personal reality. That who they are today is not who they have to be tomorrow. So who they are today is based upon the actions and behaviors and the thoughts and the experiences, the inputs, the outputs of yesterday. And that's created who they are today. How you're acting today is based upon yesterday. So if we want to change our life, we just have to start changing, again, what we're thinking about saying and doing today. And eventually it'll change our personal reality. Maybe you've experienced this before, right? Where you've noticed someone that you're like, man, that person is in such a bad mood. I don't know if you've ever noticed that before. It's like, man, that person is in such a bad mood. What's really going on? Why is that person in such a bad mood? They weren't in a bad mood last year. It's just like lately they're in a bad mood. What do you think happens to a bad mood if it's left unattended. Well, that bad mood will turn into a temperament. And you'll say, they just kind of have like a negative temperament. That's because that bad mood, it's stuck. It's like, remember when we were a kid and they said something about, be careful if you have a goofy face, your mom would always say your face is gonna stick like that. Well, the same thing happens with your moods. You could be in a bad mood and all of a sudden just sticks. And now it's there for 3, 4, 5 weeks. And then after it's been there for 4, 5, 6 weeks, people say it's just they're temperate. They're just kind of a grumpy person or a depressed person that's just kind of how they are. So then all of a sudden that temperament sticks. And now that temperament goes from a mood that's been around for a month to just kind of a temperament for the next 6 months. And then eventually it just becomes your personality. He's just a grumpy person, just a negative person. They're just always an oppositional person. So your personality creates your personal reality. And so if we want to be the best we can from a leadership perspective to coach the people that we have, then we have to do our best to separate that the person in front of me is not a grumpy person. The person in front of me just has their face stuck like that for the last several years, and they weren't always like that. When they were 8, they weren't a grumpy person. When they were 8, they were a free person. They were very different. They just made some wrong choices, and those choices have now turned into a temperament, and that temperament's now just turned their personality. But if you can kind of unravel all that stuff, then you have a great chance of really freeing a person from anything that's holding them back. Okay, number 4. A salesperson's success and learning is equal to the coach's content plus structure. The simple concept is this, and it's just as important the order that you do things and the way that you go about doing it, like the person that you hire. So a salesperson's success and learning is equal to the coach's content plus structure. So how prepared you are, your belief in the person, what you're coming to the table with, the way that you say things, the way that you train things, the way that you go about things. So like, for example, for us, we don't believe in one-day events because we just know that doesn't change behavior. We know that you would never get on an airplane with someone that went to a one-day seminar. You would never get on an operating table with a doctor that ever went to a one-day seminar. We know that. And so because of that, we have these long-term engagements. Minimum engagement's 8 weeks, and it's a combination of seminars to teach the overall framework from beginning to end, because people like to see the beginning, middle, and end of something to let themselves go. Then you have the experiential learning purpose. You have the weekly discussions. You have the cadence of the video. So these are all different ways to try to help a person think differently and change their behavior. So it's the structure of something is just as important as the person that you hire and what your goals are for them. So here's an example, right? So if I said to Mary, I love you, but you're getting on my nerve, which version do you think is going to be received better? The first option is, hey Mary, I love you, but you're getting on my nerves. Okay. Versus the second option is, you're getting on my nerves, but I love you. Which one do you think is received better? I'm saying the same thing, but the structure of what I'm saying is different. Content's the same, structure is different. So what a great example of, in both scenarios, I said you're getting on my nerves. In both scenarios, I said I love you. But when I said I love you, but you're getting on my nerves, Mary, of course, did not hear the I love you part. She just heard that she's getting on my nerves, right? But when I switch it to you're getting on my nerves, but I love you, immediately she's now couched with I love you. She hears that part, and we can maybe have a more positive conversation around the I'm getting on my nerves. It's received better. So the content is the same, but the structure is just as important as the content. And so that's the fourth one. So we're gonna be working on that a lot. How we go about doing something is just as important as obviously what we're trying to accomplish. Both are important. And then number 5 is this, and that's there's more than enough time to reach any goal when the correct structure and processes are in place. What does this mean? So several examples of this, and that's always be obsessed with, is it impossible to do better? Meaning that, is there anyone else that's doing better than us? Is there anyone on the sales team that's doing better than us? Is there another company that's doing better than us? So you always want to figure out, is it possible to do better? And what you'll find is the answer is normally yes. There's someone else out there that's doing a better job, and so therefore it's possible. And once we figure that out, then we say, okay, well, then what do I need to do to adjust my resources? So my internal resources of what I'm thinking about, saying, and doing. What new coaching can I get? What training can I get, et cetera. So that's it. The second kind of point here I want to make around this one, and that's so often sales leaders, one of the number one things I hear is I don't have enough time to coach all of my people every single week. That's one of the number one things I hear. I totally get it. I was there too. I don't have enough time to coach my people. I have too many people on my team. I don't have enough time. We need more sales leadership. We need more managers. And that could be true. So I'm not saying you're not correct, but more times than not, when I work with them, first they have a structural problem or they've got a hiring problem. So meaning that either they're not structuring their day correctly, so they're not doing daily huddles, they're not having effective sales meetings, they're not structuring things correctly during the day. Maybe they're spending too much time in kind of admin type meetings and not meetings to move the needle. Maybe they're spending too much time doing reports and not in the field. So sometimes it's more of a structure thing. Sometimes it's we're not effective when we're actually out there. So when we're actually coaching someone, what normally takes, like what I tell people is, what takes a lot of managers 3 hours to create behavioral change and get a salesperson to do differently, you could do in 30 minutes. If you learned the right structure, if you learned the right formula to coach them, you could shave off 2.5 hours of coaching time by just changing some structure of things. So there's definitely more time than we think, but it's usually a structural problem, or it is a hiring problem. So you guys all know, I'm a big fan of an assessment called the SPQ. Who cares what the assessment is? But I'll tell you right now, if you have a salesperson on your team that's got a 50 on motivation, let's just use that example. They have a 50 on motivation, and they got a 50 on goals. Okay, so what does that say? The 50 on motivation says, here is my energy, my motivation, my endurance to deal with the circumstances that I've been dealing with. So what does that mean? Think about endurance like when you're climbing a mountain or you're doing some endurance race. It's that can I handle the resistance that's gonna be kind of brought in front of me? So the resistance would be, I'm not buying until after the election. Or the resistance is, I've got champagne taste and a beer budget. What I really want is this, this supreme thing that I can't have unless you discount the price. I'm not gonna buy it. So now I've got to convince them to obviously lower their budget in order to buy anything from me. So it's that resistance. It's I'm not making a decision here, without sleeping on it. I'm not gonna make a decision without running it by 4 different people. I've got to talk to so-and-so. So that's the resistance. So you have to have enough endurance to be able to handle that. Or let's say the first lead of the day doesn't qualify and you've now used 2.5 hours to figure it out. They don't have the appropriate credit, or they can't actually do the job. Can't actually be a qualified customer for you. And you now just kind of burn through 2.5 hours of energy, right? Well, if you don't have enough endurance, then you're done. Like after you don't have that win in the beginning, then you're not gonna have enough endurance to handle the same type of customer, the second customer of the day or the third customer of the day. So you need that endurance to be able to get through that stuff. Goal level is how clear are you on running your plays. So with this customer, I'm gonna follow this process. Here's what I'm gonna say, here's what I'm gonna do. If they say this, I'm gonna say this back. That's goal level. So again, if they're getting a lot of category 1 buyers, which are buyers that haven't decided to make a change, they need to have more goals. They got to have a more structured process to convince the customer to make a change first, and then narrow down the options and then close them. Like that's going to require a much more in-depth sales process than a category 3 buyer who's torn between you and someone else, but is definitely going to make a change. So which I'm assuming they are right now, if they're getting more category 1 buyers today based upon the circumstances that are out there, less people that have decided to really make a change, then they're going to need higher goals, because they're going to have a more detailed sales process to take them through. They need to have higher motivation in order to make that happen. So what are your options? Your options are A, that you hire people with more goals and more motivation so that they can fill in the gaps for the circumstances they've been given, or B, you have to fill in the blank. Let me be clear on that. So it's not, you don't have to fire everyone tomorrow. You have to fill in the blank as the leader. Well, how do you do that? Well, if they have a 50 goal level, which means they're not exactly clear on the detailed steps they need to do in order to close something, you have to fill in the blanks. You have to say, hey, let's go over exactly what you're going to say and do with this customer. And when they say this, what are you going to say back? So you have to do a lot more of that pre-game routine to make sure their mind is goal-oriented on what they're going to say, when they're going to say it, how they're going to say it, if they're lacking that personal goals, again, based upon the customers that they're giving. The harder customers need more goals or motivation. So same thing. If the circumstances are tough, then again, you need to hire more motivated people, or you have to provide more external motivation. And that's through celebrating the wins, celebrating their aha moments, getting them to see the successes, telling the war stories of how they closed the deal, giving more praise, having more games, having more little spiffs and contests. Those are all things that you do to create kind of an artificial external motivation to fill the lack of their own personal self-motivation. And that's really what we're measuring, right? It's how much intrinsic motivation are you bringing to the table? And we need to provide external motivation in order to fill the gap to make the sales in today's circumstances. So again, in some markets are easier than others, as we know, right? And when those markets are easier, in order to make your minimum goal, you don't need as high of a salesperson from goals and motivation. But in the circumstance that we're in today, you need to up-level them. You need to up-level their motivation and goals in the short run, as well as constantly top grade from a recruiting perspective.